Watch this number, $2 trillion. That is how much money China processed through their new digital currency in a single day this September. It didn't go through Visa, it didn't go through MasterCard, it didn't touch a single American bank. It went through a ghost system that doesn't need America's permission to exist. While you were scrolling TikTok and arguing about the election, China just turned on the machine that ends dollar dominance. And here is the part that nobody is telling you. This isn't new. This isn't unexpected. This exact pattern has destroyed every reserve currency in history. I'm going to prove it to you in the next 20 minutes with 4 historical examples that will make your blood run cold. Right now, the US dollar controls 56.3% of global reserves. That sounds strong, right? Wrong. It was over 70% just 25 years ago. Do the math. We are losing 1 print of our market share every single year. At this rate, the dollar dominance mathematically ends before 2035. But here is a statistic that signals the endgame. China's digital Yuan just doubled its transaction volume in 14 months. They went from under $1 trillion to over $2 trillion. They have 180 million digital wallets connected to 23 central banks. They are processing transactions in 7 seconds at 98% lower cost than the US banking system. The monopoly is broken. And before you say, but America is different, we are too big to fail, let me stop you right there. Every dying empire said the same thing. The Spanish said it, the Dutch said it, the British said it, they all followed the exact same 5-stage pattern. And America just entered stage 4. This information is dangerous to the status quo. The algorithm suppresses dollar collapse content because it causes panic. We need to hit 1,000 subscribers to push this warning past the censors. If you want to know how much time is left in the hourglass, subscribe now. I am going to show you the pattern. And once you see it, you will realize this isn't a political opinion. This is mathematics. Cold, predictable, and inevitable. Every reserve currency in history, from the Roman denarius to the British pound, has followed this exact 5-stage sequence. Stage 1, foundation. A nation rises with real economic power, real production, trade surpluses, sound money backed by gold or silver. Other nations want the currency because it represents actual wealth. This is the earning phase. Stage 2, ascendancy. Through trade and military strength, that currency becomes the world reserve. Other countries hold it. Debts are settled in it. This creates exorbitant privilege. The reserve nation can borrow at lower rates and run deficits. It feels like magic. But here's the trap. The privilege becomes a temptation. The printing press becomes a solution to every problem. Stage 3, overextension. Once you can print the world's money, stopping becomes politically impossible. Military spending explodes. 900 bases. Social programs balloon. To supply the world with dollars, America must run trade deficits. We borrow to consume. We print to pay the debt. The money supply grows faster than the real output. The rot sets in. Stage 4, crisis. This is where we are right now. Foreign holders realize they are holding a melting ice cube. They start to diversify slowly. A central bank buys gold here. A country settles oil in Yuan there. This creates a feedback loop. As confidence drops, more holders exit. As more exit, the reserve nation prints faster to cover the gap. Inflation accelerates. Stage 5, transformation. The old currency loses reserve status, not through war, but through market forces. Countries find a better alternative. The cycle repeats. It happened to Spain. It happened to Holland. It happened to Britain. And now, with $38 trillion in debt, the math says it is America's turn. Why can't America just crush the digital yuan? Why can't we just raise interest rates and make the dollar strong again? Because of one number, $38.4 trillion. That is the national debt right now, this month, December 2025. It grew by $2.23 trillion in just 1 year. Let me break that down. That is $6 to $12 billion per day. That is $70,000 every single second you have been watching this video. Per person, you personally owe $112,000. Per household, it is nearly $300,000. But the total number isn't the killer. The killer is the service cost. Last year, the US government paid $879.9 billion just in interest. That money isn't going to roads. It isn't going to schools. It isn't going to the military. It is vaporized. It is pure tribute paid to bondholders. This is the trap. Interest is now the 3rd largest line item in the entire federal budget. 13% of every dollar the government spends goes to interest. And here's the terrifying part. Half of all US debt matures by 2026. That means it all has to be refinanced at today's higher interest rates. The average rate right now is about 3.3%. If rates go up just 1%, That adds another $380 billion in annual interest expenses. Forever. This is why the Fed is trapped. If they raise rates to fight inflation, they bankrupt the government. If they lower rates to save the government, inflation destroys the currency. This is not a budget problem. This is a system reaching terminal velocity. China sees this. They know the US is paralyzed by its own debt. They know we cannot defend the dollar without collapsing the economy. So, while we are suffocating under interest payments, they built a weapon to cut the throat of the dollar completely. So, how do you kill a currency that is used for the 88% of global trade? You don't attack the money, you attack the network. For 50 years, the US dollar's true power wasn't the green paper in your pocket. It was SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Think of SWIFT as the nervous system of the global economy. Every time a bank in Japan sends money to a bank in Germany, the signal goes through SWIFT. And because the US controls the choke points of this system, we see everything. If we don't like you, if you are Iran or Russia or a company we sanctioned, we flip a switch. We cut you off. Your economy freezes instantly. SWIFT is the ultimate weapon of war. But what if you could build a new nervous system? This is exactly what China has done. It is called Project Enbridge. Most Americans have never heard of it, but it is the single biggest threat to US national security since the Cold War. Enbridge is a digital platform built by the central banks of China, Thailand, Hong Kong, the UAE, and recently, Saudi Arabia. Here's the difference. In the SWIFT system, money travels through correspondent banks, usually in New York. It takes 3 to 5 days to settle. It costs money at every stop, and Uncle Sam watches every penny. In the Enbridge system, the money teleports. It uses distributed ledger technology to connect central banks directly. Peer-to-peer, no New York, no correspondent banks, no US permission. Remember the $2 trillion figure? This is how they moved it. On Enbridge, a transaction doesn't take 3 days. It takes 7 seconds. It doesn't cost $50. It costs pennies. And most importantly, it is invisible to the United States. We cannot sanction what we cannot see. We cannot freeze what we cannot touch. This isn't a pilot program anymore. It is a fully operational kill switch for American sanctions. If China invades Taiwan tomorrow, and we try to sanction them, they will simply flip the switch to Enbridge. Their economy will keep humming along, trading with the Middle East and Asia in 7-second bursts, while the US Treasury screams at a blank screen. The exorbitant privilege of the dollar relies on the world needing to use our rails. Enbridge proves they don't need us anymore. And now that the rails are built, they are moving the most valuable commodity on Earth onto the ghost train. But a payment system is useless if you don't have anything to buy with it. So, what is the most valuable commodity on Earth? Oil. And this is where the digital yuan goes from being a tech experiment to a dollar killer. To understand why, you have to go back to 1974. The US had just gone off the gold standard. The dollar was dying. Inflation was rampant. So, we struck the deal of the century with Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple. The US military would protect the House of Saud forever. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to price every single barrel of oil in US dollars. This created the Petrodollar. Suddenly, if France wanted oil, they had to buy US dollars first. If Japan wanted energy, they had to hold US Treasury bonds. This created an artificial, permanent demand for the dollar. It is the only reason we have been able to run $38 trillion in debt without hyperinflation. The world had to buy our debt to buy their energy. That deal is dead. Saudi Arabia is no longer looking west for security. They are looking east for commerce. China is now their biggest customer, and the customer is always right. Recently, Saudi Arabia and China signed a $7 billion currency swap agreement. They are now actively settling oil trades in digital yuan using the Enbridge platform. The monopoly is broken. Think about the consequences. If Thailand can buy oil from Saudi Arabia using digital yuan, why do they need to hold US dollars? They don't. If Brazil can trade soy for Chinese fertilizer using Enbridge, why do they need US Treasury bonds? They don't. This triggers a reverse liquidity crisis. For 50 years, we exported our inflation to the world. We printed dollars and the world soaked them up to buy oil. But now, the tide is turning. As the petrodollar dies, those trillions of unwanted dollars are going to come flooding back home. When foreign nations dump their dollar reserves, that cash enters the US domestic economy. It is the economic equivalent of a dam breaking. We are looking at imported hyperinflation that the Fed cannot stop because they cannot raise rates on a $38 trillion debt. The Saudi pivot was the final nail in the coffin. The petro-yuan isn't a theory for 2030. It is happening in the shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf right now. The US Navy is still patrolling the waters, but the cargo passing them is no longer priced in American money. We are paying for the security, and China is getting the discount. This is the definition of an empire in decline. We are subsidizing the very system that is replacing us. The algorithm hides the petrodollar story because it is the linchpin of the entire US economy. If the world stops needing dollars for oil, the game is over. Subscribe now before the flood hits. We have mapped the entire crime scene. We saw the $38 trillion debt that makes defense impossible. We saw Enbridge, the 7-second kill switch for sanctions. We saw the Saudi pivot that broke the petrodollar. The machine is running. The pattern is executing. Stage 5 is not a theory, it is a waiting room. So, what does this mean for you? It means you have a choice right now that your neighbors don't even know exists. Most people will do nothing. They will believe in American exceptionalism. They will trust that the Fed will fix it. They will hold their savings in a currency that is mathematically destined to lose its reserve status. And just like the middle class in Weimar Germany or the loyalists in the British Empire, they will watch their purchasing power evaporate over a single decade. You cannot stop the pattern. You cannot vote your way out of $38 trillion in debt. You cannot protest against the digital yuan, but you can draft behind it. The transition from one reserve currency to another is always the greatest transfer of wealth in history. It destroys the holders of paper and it enriches the holders of things. This is your lifeboat strategy. 1. Get out of the dollar. You don't need to sell everything, but you must diversify. If you hold 100% of your life energy in US dollars, you are betting your survival on a melting ice cube. 2. Own hard assets. History shows that when a currency dies, capital flees to things that cannot be printed. Gold and silver are the primary beneficiaries. They are the only assets that have survived every single currency collapse for 5,000 years. 3. Own productivity, real estate with cash flow, farmland that produces food, businesses that solve real problems. These assets reprice higher as the currency devalues. The transition will be chaotic. We will see massive volatility, supply chain disruptions, and political anger. But if you are positioned correctly, you don't have to be a victim. You can be the architect of your family's safety. The digital siege is here. The walls of the dollar are breached. The only question left is whether you will be standing inside the burning house when the roof collapses or watching from the safety of the lifeboat. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is pattern recognition. And the pattern is screaming at you. The next video is even more critical. We are going to expose the specific timeline for the rollout of the US Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC, the government's final attempt to trap you in the system before the switch. You need to know the launch date to beat the lock-in. Subscribe right now. Do not wait until the gates close. Class dismissed.